morning and thanks for logging on to Bloomberg Quint Live. You're watching Daybreak with me, Alex Matthew. First, the headlines. The Supreme Court refuses to stay BJP leader B.S. Yeddyurappa's oath-taking ceremony as the new Karnataka Chief Minister, directs Attorney General K.K. Venugopal to produce the letter that Yeddyurappa wrote to the governor seeking to form the government in the state. Asian markets open higher on the back of strong closing on Wall Street. Aluminium dumping from China could spoil the party in an otherwise good year, says Hindalco's managing director Satish Pai in an interview to Bloomberg Quint. And the heads of all banks put under prompt corrective action by the Reserve Bank of India will meet Finance Ministry officials today. Let's turn to the big story now. The battle for Karnataka saw some overnight drama in the courtroom as a three-judge bench refused to stay the swearing-in ceremony of B.S. Yeddyurappa that will take place later this morning. The court, however, has asked the BJP to produce a letter which Yeddyurappa wrote to the Karnataka governor to stake his claim in the forming of the government. Arpan Chaturvedi has been present over the course of that entire hearing in the Supreme Court. Arpan, what essentially led to this point and what's the road ahead?
Well, this was an unprecedented hearing in the Supreme Court where the Chief Justice of India last night agreed to hear the matter, and he set up a bench of three judges, Justice K.K. Sikri, Justice Ashok Bhushan and Justice Bobde was part of this bench. The hearing started at around 2 a.m. And from the Congress side, we saw Senior Advocate Abhishek Manu Singhvi, who was arguing. And from the other side, we saw top government lawyers, including the Attorney General K.K. Venugopal. Then there was additional Solicitor General Tushar Mehta, who was present in the court. There was ASG Maninder Singh, who was present in the court. And there was also former Attorney General Mukul Rohatgi, who was representing two of the BJP MLAs who have won elections in Karnataka. Dr. Singh started his argument, and the crux of his argument was that going by the precedent laid down by the Supreme Court in the past cases, including the Goa case, where, if you remember, last year there was a case in the Supreme Court after the Goa elections where the Congress, which was the single largest party but could not form the government, had challenged the decision of the governor to allow and to invite post-poll alliance of BJP and certain other parties. And Dr. Singhvi's argument mainly was that the governor has to look as to which party can provide the most stable government. And in this case, it was the JDS and the Congress post-poll alliance. From the government side, Mr. Rohatgi again then started from the other side, and he said that it is the governor's prerogative, and the court cannot issue an injunction against a governor who is performing his constitutional duty. So the hearing again went on for around 3 hours, and right at around 5:36 in the morning, the Supreme Court passed its order where it said that it will not stay the hearing, but they have asked the letter that was written by B.S. Yeddyurappa stating his claims to form the government, with the letter which was written to the governor. The court has said that letter now needs to be produced in court, and the next date of hearing now is Friday 10:30 a.m. when this case will again resume in the Supreme Court.
All right, and do tune in over the course of... Thanks so much, for Arpan, for that. Do tune in over the course of the day. We'll start, of course, with coverage of the swearing-in ceremony in Karnataka. And, of course, there's lots more to talk about with regard to that case, all the arguments from both the sides with regard to the formation of the government in Karnataka. With that, let's move on to the trade setup for the day in India. Jayesh Khilani and Agam Vakil are here to set you up for the day's trade and also to tell you what's happening in the futures and options space. Jayesh, first to you, drama in the courtroom aside, what's likely to happen in the markets today?
It's no drama expected for the equity markets. If you look at the SGX Nifty, that is indicating an extremely tepid start, trading just about 5 points in the positive, and a start below 10,800 is likely for the Nifty. But mind you that this is not in line with what the Asian markets are doing. So I believe the Nikkei is trading about 0.5% higher. So if those cues are to go by, then the SGX Nifty could in fact climb higher from current levels. But if you look at the areas that we got yesterday, we had a mixed close as far as all of them are concerned. We had Vedanta and Wipro, which gained more than 1% each, while we had Tata Motors and Infosys, which also managed to close positive. Now, as far as the losers are concerned, we had ICICI Bank, Dr. Reddy's and HDFC Bank ADR, which actually closed lower. As far as commodity cues are concerned, we are seeing that oil prices are currently trading higher, just about 0.2% for the WTI. In fact, this is the fourth consecutive day that we are seeing positivity come in for oil prices, and Brent is now trading just below the $80 per barrel mark. Now, if you look at the base metal space, no major cues coming in there as well. In fact, none of the base metals climbed or declined more than 1% each. So you can see the numbers over there. We had aluminium, lead and tin which closed negative, while we had copper, zinc and nickel which closed positive. Now, if you look at the Shanghai Futures Exchange, morning trade has been on the positive side with all of the base metals gaining less than 1% each. As far as gold prices are concerned, once again, we saw that gold actually snapped its 3-day losing streak, but still trading below the 1300 mark. As far as fund flows are concerned, the FIs sold nearly 700 crores worth of equity, and the DIs pumped in more than 200 crores of equity. For the month itself, the FIs have sold more than 2,700 crores, while the DIs have pumped in nearly 7,000 crores for this month itself. Now, as far as the key indices are concerned, we had mixed indices as well. So the Nifty 50 actually closed more than 0.5% lower, while the mid cap and the small cap index did relatively better than that. So the mid cap index declined about 0.35%, while the small cap index managed to close in the green. Now we had some gainers and losers. The Nifty Realty Index, it had been losing for past few sessions. That made a comeback and gained more than 2%, while we had Nifty FMCG also, which closed about 1.8% higher. Now, if you look at the losers, we had, once again, the banking space over here. So you had Nifty PSU Bank, which was the top loser in trade, 3% lost over there. We had Nifty Energy down 1.7%, and we had the Nifty Bank, which declined more than 1%. As far as VIX is concerned, we saw a surge of about 2% for the VIX, and for the contribution of what led to the 0.5% fall for the Nifty. HUL, ITC, Yes Bank and TCS, those were the gainers, while we had Reliance, ICICI Bank, HDFC Twins, which contributed to the losers. But Agam, what can we expect from the derivative space?
Sure. So we have seen the Nifty come back off the mark of 10,800. That may be a matter of concern. We've seen decline of around 2% in the futures. When it comes to the Nifty Bank futures as well, there was a lot of traction, but ultimately we saw the open interest decline by as much as 6%, even as the underlying declines by 1%, longs unwinding coming along there. Coming down to the India Volatility Index, that edged up higher by as much as 2%, but when it comes to changes in open interest, again, we saw more unwinding in the 10,800 put and a little more writing in the same strike when it comes to that particular call. In terms of stocks, again, we're keeping an eye on Reliance Communication, which moves into the ban, and a bunch of other counters that we're keeping an eye on. Escorts, fresh longs building up there, and we also had some strength coming in Asian Paints. Another 4.5% added in open interest, so fresh longs coming in there as well. And among many others, we're also keeping an eye on some of the mid caps that we saw buzzing in trade. Watch out for those as we move into trade today.
All right, thanks so much for that, Agam. Let's shift focus now to the international market, just to give you a sense of what happened overnight and what's happening in the early morning trade. Wall Street rebounded strongly on Wednesday as upbeat data about US industry and positive corporate results offset weak housing data and inflation jitters. Yields on the 10-year US Treasury note continued to move higher, though, hitting 3.1%. Bloomberg's Abigail Doolittle wraps up all the action on Wall Street in this report.
Stocks finished modestly to solidly higher in Wednesday's Wall Street session, with the Dow gaining by about 0.25%. The S&P 500 climbed by 0.4%. The Nasdaq outperformed, up about 0.6%. All of this a bounce back from Tuesday's decline, even as yields rose once again. The 10-year yield nearly at 3.1%, its highest level since 2011. Now, relative to the sector composition for the gains made by the major averages, relative to the S&P 500, it was broad-based. 9 of the 11 sectors trading higher, and near the top, consumer discretionary, a big piece of that, Macy's. Macy's up more than 10% on the day. This as the department store company put up a very strong first quarter, beating estimates right across the board. They also raised the full-year outlook. In turn, that helped many of the other retailing shares, including other department stores such as Nordstrom, JCPenney, and Kohl's. It even helped some of the suppliers such as Estee Lauder, among many, many others. Now, another sector that did quite well, or subsector, I should say, the chips. The chip sector really outperformed, up 1.4%. Lots of the well-known names rallying there, including Micron, Qualcomm, AMD. All of this despite the fact that Bitcoin dropped for a second day in a row. And confirming the fact that Wednesday was a risk-on day for the financial markets in the U.S., the Russell 2000, the small cap index, climbed by 1.4%, hitting an all-time high. In New York, Abigail Doolittle, Bloomberg News.
All right, let's move on to some other international news. President Donald Trump has said that North Korea hasn't directly raised concerns about his proposed summit with its leader, Kim Jong-un. That's after the country threatened through its state-run news agency to pull out of the meeting. Bloomberg's Joe Subzik has this report.
This has been a technique that North Korea has used through several U.S. presidential administrations, but they have not made any direct overture to the U.S. or given any clear indication, at least that's according to the president. From the U.S. side, they say they'll plan to be there and ready to talk. And if that doesn't happen, so be it. White House Press Secretary Sarah Sanders said that if the talks don't come through and the U.S. will continue its campaign of what it calls maximum pressure, economic sanctions, diplomatic isolation, and continued leaning on China to cut North Korea off. But there has been no indication either from the North Korean end that they really are pulling out, or whether this is simply a warning shot to set out their negotiating position.
All right, and I was just taking a look at the Asian markets. The markets in China and also Hong Kong have opened up. There's no clarity as to where they're all moving. They're not moving in the same direction. It's mixed. So the Nikkei in Japan is trading higher by about 0.5% currently. But the first few ticks in China, so on the Shanghai benchmark, are in fact lower. The Kospi is trading positive. All right, let's move on to earnings now. Tata Steel posted a strong fourth quarter performance. The Mumbai-based steelmaker's profit rose due to a one-time gain though. Nikki Marchandani is here with all the key highlights. Nikki, morning, over to you.
Hi Alex, it's been an operationally strong quarter for Tata Steel. It has delivered a beat on account of the improved spreads that we've seen in this quarter. Also, Indian EBITDA has improved as much as 3.8% sequentially, while its Oman business EBITDA has risen as much as 78% sequentially. Standalone EBITDA per ton, which is an important metric that we kept an eye out on, increased 15% sequentially to a number of around 15,917 rupees. This was higher than the estimates of around 15,000 rupees that we were estimating, mainly on back of pricing growth that has come through. The volumes, however, sequentially, we saw some dip coming in at a number of around 3.3 million ton as compared to 3.34 that we've seen in the previous quarter. That is due to blast furnace outage at Kalinganagar. Also, the company, as you just mentioned, reported an exceptional gain of around 11,376 crore on consolidated basis level. That's account of a restructuring of UK pension scheme. Besides that, deleveraging efforts continue. The company has reduced its net debt, which now currently stands at around 69,215 odd crore. However, the Bhushan Power acquisition, according to the management commentary, is expected to weigh down on the earnings or the balance sheet of the company. What brokerages make out of the earning, Credit Suisse says that it's a positive commentary. It gives comfort on account of profitability for the upcoming year, that's FY19. European operations to an extent were hit in Q4, but then the beat in other regions pretty much cushioned all the fall that we saw on account of miss in this division. Morgan Stanley also sounded upbeat about the earnings. It says that there is a strong performance that the company has registered both on domestic as well as European business. It says that the positive outlook bodes well for near-term earnings, and also as the management has highlighted, the key approvals for Bhushan acquisition are in place.
All right, thanks so much for that, Nikki. Let's move on now and speak about Hindalco. In fact, Hindalco reported its numbers yesterday, remember, and its profit fell the most in 9 quarters. But speaking to the management, they've said that the main problem with regard to the operation performance going forward is likely to be the rising input costs. And the management, of course, was speaking to Bloomberg Quint's Menaka Doshi. Listen in to what they said.
The Rusal was a shock to the system, and there was a period of time when the LME spiked up to 2600, 2700. But I think the dust is settling.
So we're at about 21, 2200 right now.
We're at 2300.
2300.
So I think that the 22 to 2300 is where we are going to be for the rest of the year.
Okay.
I think China is showing remarkable discipline, though I am a bit worried whether Chinese aluminium that now cannot go to the US or is, let's say, more difficult to go to the US will come into India. So that is one big concern that through the Aluminium Association we have voiced to the government that we need to be really vigilant that as all these countries start to take care of the industry, we don't become the dumping ground.
But we are living in a protectionist world suddenly, right? And I think, you know, commodity has been at the core of the conversations that many of the countries have had, especially with the kind of capacities that China has built up. How much of a risk factor would you say that is for 2019?
Largely the risks are known. Let's put it that way. There's no unknown risk in that. We know that China has got capacity. But what we have seen in the last 6 months is that they seem to be very serious about the environmental issues, and they seem to be quite serious as not to aggravate trade tensions by trying to export a lot more. They are trying to work with the US, etc., to keep the trade balances at reasonable levels. So yes, there is a protectionist environment, but I think people are also practically realizing that you cannot be islands anymore. There has to be some, good amount of global trade going on. My only worry is whether in India we will be able to protect domestic industry, because the only place in the world that's growing is a huge economy doing very well is India. And I want that, because of the free trade agreements we have signed, we are discussing RCEP, of which China is a part. We do not do anything that will make India become a little bit of a dumping ground.
Nestle's strong showing in the first quarter results was largely on account of better sales for its Maggi and Nescafe brand. Now, Suresh Narayanan, the chairman and managing director at the consumer goods firm, spoke to Menaka Doshi and started by speaking about volumes. Listen in.
The volume growth is about 8.5%. So 8.5% and about 5% is the pricing impact. So this 8.5% has come, Menaka, across the portfolio. So I think what I'm particularly pleased about and grateful to the consumers and also to the teams for enabling for Nestle is a secular growth across categories. It's not just one or two categories, but all categories that have contributed to growth. So the milks and nutrition categories have also had a fairly robust volume growth. The foods category has also had a strong double-digit growth. If I look at the categories of chocolates and confectionery, also some of our brands have done extremely well, upwards of 20-25% growth. And also in the coffee and beverages segment, we've had some very encouraging performance of brand Nescafe, which has also had strong double-digit growth. So overall terms, I believe that the growth has been secular. It has been volume based, in keeping with the overall simple strategy that we had put forward. Volume based, consumption based and penetration linked growth is what we were looking at, together with the platform of renovation innovation. So therefore, in the growth numbers that you are seeing, almost a fifth of the growth numbers have come out of innovation and renovation. So new products that have been put out into the market have also given their contribution.
All right, in earnings that you have to watch out for today, Bajaj Finance is likely to post a healthy set of numbers in the March quarter, with profits expected to jump almost 34% as per Bloomberg estimates. Agam Vakil is standing by to tell you how that is expected to come to pass and, of course, to tell you about the other numbers. Agam, over to you.
Sure, Alex. We are expecting the growth trajectory to be well on the path for Bajaj Finance, and as you already suggested, we're expecting profits to grow to nearly 35% year on year to around a little over 600 crores. We're also expecting its net interest income to rise by as much as 33.6% year on year at around 2257 crores. Now, among the major factors that we're keeping an eye on is the assets under management to see a growth of around 35% by consumer lending book, and of course asset quality is likely to remain stable. Among the key watchables, we are keeping an eye on asset quality trends, especially in the LAP and 2W and 3W businesses, and of course traction in cross-sell franchise, and the architecture of Bajaj Housing Finance specifically will be very important to watch out for with respect to their plans. But on the whole, we're expecting another very strong quarter for Bajaj Finance.
All right, thanks so much for that, Agam. Let's move on now. The Finance Ministry will be meeting officials of 11 stressed public sector banks that are currently under the prompt corrective action framework of the Reserve Bank of India. This is to gauge their progress on reforms on which infusion of capital is contingent. Bloomberg Quint's Nikunj Ori has all the details in this report.
The Finance Ministry will meet public sector banks that come under RBI's prompt corrective action framework today. These banks will have to show certain measures that they've taken to maintain their capital adequacy norms since they were placed under RBI's prompt corrective action framework. Remember, there are 11 public sector banks that currently come under the PCA framework, out of which RBI has already barred Dena Bank from further lending and has also put certain restrictions on Allahabad Bank. All these banks will have to show the measure that they've taken to improve their performance since the capital infusion by the government was differentiated between banks that come under the PCA framework and the banks that do not come under the PCA framework. Over to you.
All right, now what are the stocks that you have to watch out for going into trade today? Darshan Mehta has a list to tell you about. Darshan, any stocks that are not in your podcast today?
Yeah, I think we spoke about most of them, but one of the key stocks that you need to watch out will be probably ITC, because the company didn't give any kind of cigarette volume growth that came in, but the brokerage reports that came out, they have indicated that it's a decline of almost 2.5%. So slightly better than what was anticipated by the analyst community. Divi's Lab has said that the US FDA has inspected the Unit 1 of the Telangana plant. Zero observations. Numbers coming out, Manali Petro came out with a very strong set of numbers. Revenues were up 26%, EBITDA up 300%, profit up almost 280%. So very strong set of numbers there. Even JK Lakshmi Cement, the numbers were good. Revenue up 11%, profit up 60%, margins at 11.3% versus 9%. And GSFC came out with a good set of numbers. Revenues were up 33%, profit was down 17% because of a tax credit of 114 crores in the base quarter, but nevertheless the margins has improved to 11% from 7.5%. Weak numbers, Praj Industries, revenues down 9%, EBITDA down 18%, margins at 11% versus 13%. Dishman also, revenues down 15%, EBITDA down 17%, EBITDA margins coming in slightly lower. So overall weak set of numbers. The profit is up given the fact there was other income this time around. And Z Media revenues up 33%, but operationally very weak. Profits down 44% and EBITDA down almost 43%. So these are the weak numbers that you need to watch out for.
All right, thanks for that, Darshan. Moving into trade today, of course, politics is going to be front and center with the swearing-in ceremony scheduled to take place just a short while from now in Karnataka. But apart from that, you'll find all the live market action right here on Bloomberg Quint Live. There are also several stories on the website. First up, the CBI has filed a second charge sheet against jeweler Mehul Choksi and his companies in the 14,000 crore rupee Punjab National Bank fraud case. And Macquarie Group has said that the 3-decade bull run in the US Treasuries has ended, and they expect the benchmark yields are poised to climb to 4% over the next 18 months. Remember, they're at 3.1% currently. Right, that's all we have for you on Daybreak, but a lot more coming up on the other side of this very short break. All you need to know is up next. Do stay tuned. This is Bloomberg Quint.